nonprofit rental.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. After our special meeting last week, we added this to the agenda as directed by you all to talk about the fee schedule for nonprofit rentals at the Dillon Amphitheater. I apologize that on such short notice that we did not have any attachments in the public packet. But what I did produce is in front of you. It's a hard copy. The first is the Marina Park Pavilion fee schedule that comes directly from the website. The reservation fees range anywhere from early season, 500 for a half day to 900 for a full day. Prime season being May 24th to September 2nd, anywhere from $625 to $1,800 per day. And then at the end of the season, dropping back down to that $500 to $900 per day. The only thing that comes with this Marina Park Pavilion rental is the physical structure. It fits about 90 people to meet fire code. It's also subject to a 50% discount for Dillon residents or businesses, 25% off for Summit County residents, and a 50% off total cost for a nonprofit discount. And I've been contacted by several town council members about the actual cost of what it takes to run the Dillon Amphitheater. So my other handout for you, and I can run through this quickly, but what we wanted to do, and you all can decide whether it's accurate or not, but we figured that the only way to give you the facts is to give you all the facts, right? So it's everything in the kitchen sink. So if you run through this, there are total events. This is for 2024. There's 70 total events. And you can read through those different numbers. But our debt service, if you take 175,000 divided by 70 events, it's $2,500 per event. Capital projects, if you look at last year and this year combined, it's 1.3 million. So if you divide that by those 70 events, you get the $18,571. We also have a continual line item for the scrim, which is a $15,000 annual expenditure, which equates into $214 per use. We've had some issues with that, completely unrelated topic. We're going to be trying to make some changes there just for various different safety concerns, which will come back to you at the upcoming budget workshop. And then our sound system. When we bought the sound system, it was $750,000. The manufacturer told us an 8-year life expectancy. We times that by an average of 50 events per year, so $1,870 per use. Cleaning, this is only for the public bathrooms. This doesn't include anything behind, the back of house, back of stage. $610 per day. Staffing, this includes events, public works, audio engineer, just one. We're looking at $3,829 per day. And then legal, because if we are going to do something like open it up to all nonprofits and we have a concession or an add-on like different contracts is what I'm getting at. It's going to take some time for legal to go through those individual contracts is what I'm getting at. Our goal from a staff was trying to minimize the additional add-ons or that additional menu. So you could have a standardized contract that's non-negotiable that protects the town. So indemnification, insurance, et cetera. And then you can plug in that entity's name and put in a rate. So our total cost before you get into any add-ons is approximately $28,099
For what?
per day. This does not include additional costs for bartenders at the concessions. It doesn't include buying concessions, whether that's snacks, alcohol, non-alcoholic drinks. That is our number, our rough number, if you were to take it from a holistic standpoint.
But for paid shows, we only charge 25,000, right?
Yeah, so
So why aren't?
are you saying that we're losing money on the paid shows because we're charging 20?
Well, not necessarily. The paid shows also have concessions. And there's also revenue coming in from ticket sales too.
But we only get a small portion of that, right? Then most of that goes to the bands.
For each ticket's between $6 and $15.
Well, keep in mind, we've been allowing the church to use it for what, $1,700 a year or something like that?
1,100.
1,100, okay. And, we want to come up with a policy that's workable for nonprofits and churches and open it up to all of them. But if it's not affordable to any of them, then it's kind of a futile exercise. Which is how we got to the point where we voted the way we voted, because we had a price that wasn't workable for anybody. So I don't know if you saw the proposal I sent out, which basically you have tier 1 and tier 2, and tier 1 is churches and nonprofits that provide a tangible benefit or service to the residents of Dillon, or churches and nonprofits outside of Dillon that provide a tangible benefit or service to the town of Dillon, get a subsidized reduced rate, which is what Josh, the sheriff's attorney, said we could do. And then the other events, nonprofits that don't qualify for that would pay the actual cost for an event. And then corporate events, weddings, all that other stuff would be profit generating to offset the deficits on category 1.
Of the nonprofit.
I mean, that's the only way we make it workable for churches and nonprofits is, and the other towns do the same thing. Breckenridge, you can rent Riverwalk, just pay $500 to rent Riverwalk. So they're doing exactly the same thing, and they have the same kind of wording in their pricing schedule as what I proposed.
I'm not going to comment on Breckenridge. Breckenridge's attorney has been in contact with our attorney. I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Well, all I'm saying is if we want to do this for nonprofits and churches, it has to be in the price range they can afford, right?
Well, that would be up to you. I was asked to put together the total cost. That's what I presented to you all. It's your all decision to figure out what the policy is.
I mean, what do you guys think about having people, nonprofits and churches that are benefiting Dillon get a reduced in-kind benefit from Dillon that makes it affordable?
Well, I'll add something about, looking at the sound system, that's an accounting gimmick. If we used it 100 times a year, then it'll be $900 per use. If you add one more time, the cost is going to be exactly the same. If you add it 10 more times, the cost is going to be exactly the same. So, there's fixed overhead and there's variable overhead. The sound system is fixed overhead. 8-year life expectancy on a sound system is because of obsolescence. It's not because it's a gas tank that's going towards empty. In 8 years, it'll be obsolete. We can use it 1,000. We can use it 200 times a season, and that would bring the price down to $450 per use. So when we started this discussion, I thought we all were in agreement that if we could find a legal way to allow nonprofits to use the amphitheater, and that it all started because the lawyer said it's not legal. If we can find a legal way to do it, then let's do it. That was the intent. All the cost stuff, I don't care what the cost, if you let a nonprofit use it 20 more times, all our overhead is almost the same. So if you have, let's talk about the variable cost of each event a nonprofit would cost, and then let's charge them that. That's my opinion.
Well, Silverthorne similarly allows their facilities to be used by churches and nonprofits for free. So I don't think their cost is zero when they do that. But And Frisco has a similar policy. You can use the Frisco Pavilion. Churches have events there, and I believe that's free as well. So if we don't have a policy that allows nonprofits and churches to use our facilities, we'll be the only town in Summit County that does not allow nonprofits to use their facilities.
Is the Frisco Amphitheater like the Dillon Amphitheater? Is it?
No. But Riverwalk is pretty close. They allow, they do a church service for $500.
What was can we ask, what was the communication between the correct attorney and our attorney? Has that already been covered?
I would prefer not to talk about that in open session.
But still with that communication, our attorney still says it's not a good idea to follow that.
I'd prefer not to answer that in open session.
Okay.
Well, in the conversation we had with Josh, he seemed to think that it was okay as long as you qualify, who's getting a reduced rate and why, and it's usually for an in-kind benefit to the town, then it's not a problem to charge less than the cost. And then you have other users that pay more than the cost, and that is offset. But it has to be for all nonprofits and all churches that qualify.
It'd have to be all nonprofits. I think you can't segregate two different classes like that.
Well, I thought that's exactly what Josh said in the meeting. He said, if there was a benefit to the town, then you could provide a reciprocal benefit to the nonprofit.
I'd prefer not to discuss what was disclosed in executive session and open session.
So John, when you were talking about variable costs, I mean, one cost we can look at that's probably not really variable is the staffing total.
Yep.
Plus legal for building contracts, cleaning. I don't know.
This is ultimately the town council's decision, but if we were to use the concert sound system, town staff would prefer that we have staff of our own there because we have a huge liability risk if something were to happen to that system. Great example is if you look at Sunday, paid show, fully sold out, something happened to that morning, we would have to pay that band.
So my band played at the amphitheater last night, and between sound check and the show, I talked to a lot of the technicians that were on the soundboard and set up the equipment. And they basically said Dillon Community Church gets the same training we get. And in some cases, they have more experience because they've been doing it for 6 years than Dillon town staff has. And they hire the mixing board engineer is the same guy that the town uses for paid concerts. In addition, they have what's called a digital limiter on both the speakers and the mixing board that prevent you from overdriving the sound system. So it's virtually impossible to damage. That limiter is password protected, and it's set at the level of maximum decibels that you can, the town sound ordinance that you can run for a concert in Dillon. So it's virtually impossible to damage that sound system, and the experience and training that the church people have is the same as the town staff has.
Can I add something here too? So everyone's tired of hearing about that. I worked at Latin for 15 years and I have a lot of friends there, and I called them up and I said, hey, and first of all, they don't have it's a big amphitheater and they don't have their own sound system. Artists bring the sound systems in, but I did ask them, how fragile are these sound systems? How many times have you ever had a show canceled because the sound system failed? And they said, no, in 30 years, never. And I said, well, are these things really fragile? And they say they pack them up each night and bring it to throw it in a truck, bring it to a different venue, unpack it. And that same sound system, similar to ours, is unpacked and packed up 100 times a summer. And they're way more reliable than they used to be with new technology, and failing sound systems just doesn't happen. I asked them, what can an operator do to ruin a sound system? He said, what do you mean? Can he press some buttons to ruin the sound system? You said, no, don't drop it down the stairs, don't drop it in the lake. It's not,
Yeah, they
it's not, this thing isn't, they don't even turn them off when the lightning strikes.
We bought the sound system for concerts. Period.
Well, in the previous amphitheater, the church helped pay the sound system.
Previous amphitheater, cool.
I mean, and like, let's be serious. That number was something,
It's a lot smaller number, sure.
several dozen thousand
But the bottom
dollars.
line is,
It's not really the bottom line because that was, an investment in something that they used for a long time. And then we've invested like 100 times that amount of money
I asked,
to build the current amphitheater we have.
Yeah.
And then continue to invest hundreds of times that dollar amount,
And
so like that $40,000 or whatever it was that they raised, like is sort of pennies compared to
So
what we've put in.
I asked somebody, is it insured? Is our sound system insured? And they said, no. I said, well, why not? It's $700,000 because nobody ever breaks one of those. It's physically impossible to break it. Those digital limiters prevent it from being overdriven.
So I think, so for me, when I'm looking at this, we're sort of getting stuck on the cost of the sound system, that $1,800. But like, even if we're just looking at the cleaning, staffing and legal fees, it's $4,900. It's like $5,000. Like for just, like, if you don't talk about how much money we've spent for the amphitheater, how much money we have spent on additional capital projects and how much money we've spent on the sound system, just to clean it, staff it, and have a contract built up, it's $5,000.
So I talked to the church about the cleaning thing, and when they have a church service, they basically show up a couple hours early with mops and buckets and brooms, and they clean up from the previous night's show, mop up spilled beer and sweep up everything. And the bathrooms are locked for the church service. They have been for 3 years, so you don't need to clean the bathrooms. They send them over to the park to go to the bathroom. So I think those numbers don't reflect what, the church has been doing it on their own. They hire the sound engineer the town uses, but otherwise they staff it. And the people that have been staffing it actually have more experience than the town of Dillon staff. They've been doing it longer.
So let's listen to the rest of the council, because we've heard you talk
Okay.
maybe 10 times now, and let's let everyone else get some words in here. And then if you guys would,
Okay.
just to keep this conversation, you can go first, Renee, but just to keep the conversation from getting repetitive or sort of like as if any of us have a hearing problem. If you've already said it, we don't need to hear it again, right? We can all listen to information once and consider it, and repeating it over and over isn't going to change anyone's mind. So if you've already put that argument forward, let's try to just keep it as it's forward, it's out there, we're all intelligent, and we will consider it. Renee, go ahead, please.
Well, we have a state-of-the-art amphitheater, and I feel that we should be, I think Oliver mentioned at a previous meeting that we should be opening it up to everybody to generate income and let organizations use our amphitheater. And these costs, I understand all these costs, and we're going to have to find a solution. But if we open it up to weddings and corporate events, and then as well as opening it up to different organizations on a Sunday morning, because in the past that has never been a problem. It hasn't been. I'd like to know how much it's cost to have any organization use it on just a Sunday morning all these years. So I think it's just, again, I'm in favor of opening it up, using our theater, our amphitheater that we have spent so much money on. And again, it brings visitors all over the town. So I'm still in favor of opening it up to everyone. That's it.
And well, can I dig in so I can understand your comment a little bit more? I think that's where we're at, of opening it up. And this is the exploration we're doing. So the numbers staff put in front of us is, it could be $28,000. If you look at the whole package of what we've invested to open it up to everyone in order to break even. So are you saying open it up to everyone to make money, to generate income?
Yeah.
To the tune of $28,099.
Well, we've got the concerts. Maybe we should charge more for the concerts. We've got the town sponsored events. We've got 3 buckets, and then we've got the nonprofits. So yeah, the nonprofits are, they're gonna have a different, they should be, they should be established on a different fee schedule, if you will, but it should be fair across the board, no matter who uses it. And, yes.
So
Does that answer your question?
No, it doesn't, because I think that's where we're at. I agree with you on those points. I think that's where we've gotten to. What I want to get out of this discussion is the fee schedule. We either have to say, okay, staff says it's $28,000. If you divide it all up, kind of every time you use the amphitheater, or we need to be suggesting the town subsidize in some sort of way to get to that schedule. And so that's what I'm hoping to get out of this conversation.
Well, every Sunday morning, it's been 28,000 all these years. Do you know that? Can I ask you that question?
No, it has not, we have not spent $28,000, but if you look at it in total, that's where this number is coming from. If you talk about the events, and if you're talking about it generating income, it has to cover what we pay. And you're right, John, we could use it more. We could use 200 events a year, and that number would go down in certain ways. But
Carol, I
if you add it all up, this is the number that you could say is what we pay every time we use it.
Well,
based on
I disagree with that.
and what we pay for it.
I disagree with that $18,000 capital depreciation number, because that would be like saying to somebody who wants to rent a boat slip at the marina, you have to pay for the $10 million. You have to pay your capital depreciation on the $10 million we spent to build the marina. That's not how they price the boat slips. What we paid for it and the depreciation isn't charged to the users. That's something we took on, and we try and cover the debt with income, but you can't add that as a cost. That should never be on this list of costs of using the amphitheater.
You're saying the capital projects.
Yeah, you got to take that $18,571 number out, because nobody pays for the capital depreciation. That's a fixed number that, we paid for it. The more we use it, the lower that number gets. But it's a number, just like at the marina, you're not charging boat slip people the cost of building the marina. That's not how you put those costs together. So that number shouldn't even be in there.
Because I'm just trying to clarify, because we paid for like $1.3 million in cash, because we don't have it debt,
No.
we don't have a debt service on it. That's why it shouldn't be included. I'm trying to.
Well,
understand.
you could amortize the debt service by the number of events and come up with a number there, but to put
So that's like when we redid the stairs, I think, and then we expanded that upper patio area. I think that's where those numbers are coming in, like
That's the back of house too.
Yeah. In the back of house stuff.
yeah, but that's a cost to the town of Dillon that is never ever amortized over the events.
Because we paid in cash. You're saying, so if we don't
Just
have it, like.
Any
something
kind
that
of
we're paying
infrastructure.
back.
Yeah, exactly. Any kind of infrastructure is never charged as a cost to the users. It's something the town does. Same with the marina. You're not charging the cost of the marina to people who use it. It wouldn't be affordable if you did.
I think the proper way to look at this is, John mentioned this, fixed costs versus variable costs. The town has decided, I think rightfully so, to invest in what is a beautiful amphitheater. I've said it before, we're sort of a victim of our own success because it's gorgeous. So there is sunk money into that facility. It's hard for me to think of anybody using the amphitheater when right next door to the pavilion, we're charging $900 for a half day in the peak summer, right? And that's a beautiful facility as well, different. But the town has established a price for the use of that facility. We're not, charging, I guess, variable costs associated with using that. People come and they bring their food and have a barbecue and do what they, do whatever they do. So I think the proper way to look at this is fixed costs versus variable costs. And I don't think, and I've said this to Nathan, I don't think debt service is a variable cost. We owe the debt service regardless. We made a commitment and we got, I don't know how much left on the debt service, but that's, it seems for me, as I look at this list, the variable cost is an audio engineer. And I think that's very reasonable. It's a $750,000 or $1 million system. And I'm more interested in making sure it works for the concerts on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, than, trying to generate some revenue off the back of that. So I think it's very reasonable that, anybody who uses it uses an audio engineer that's familiar with the system and pays for that individual. I don't know if we need security guards on a Sunday morning but maybe we do at any time of day. Maybe one person is a reasonable thing, given that, bad things can happen with public gatherings, as much as we dislike to think that. But I think what we should do is figure out what these variable costs are and use the Marina Park Pavilion as a little bit of a guide for what they are. And then whether we want to use that same policy of 50% discount for a local, nonprofit, I'd be fine with that. It looks as though, to me, as I look at all the 2024 total events, that we're subsidizing a bunch of different organizations. Right? Everything but I assume the paid shows. So the free shows, Town of Dillon, the taxpayers are picking up the tab for that. The yoga, right? I guess we're picking up the tab for that. It probably doesn't cost very much.
I don't know if they get charged anything to use it. I'd be
Well,
surprised.
but there's probably some cleanup. Somebody's gonna turn the lights on, et cetera. The country dance, my neighbor, Brithian Hill, comes down, Art does his square dance and, and he told me the other day, they use it fairly often. Don't know if they pay anything or clean up, whatever. But I would say the way to look at this is really the variable costs. And I would say that for any nonprofit, and the pricing should be sort of in that realm that covers the variable cost of using the facility, which is typically cleanup, all those things that you need to. And I believe it's totally legitimate to have a professional sound engineer.
Absolutely.
Work the sound system if that's what the nonprofit would like to use during an event. I'll say one final thing, with the complete priority for the town in terms of its events. So you can book concerts, et cetera. If you book a Sunday afternoon show and it's a big show, then the Sunday morning may not be available. Obviously, the town, both the town sponsored events as well as the paid events, concerts should have top priority.
So I understand what you mean by variable costs. I heard you say cleaning and sound engineer.
I don't know. Well, I guess if people want to use concessions, a lot of times you can rent a building and not not turn the concessions on. But if there was a need to have someone run the concession stand, I think it's reasonable to have somebody that's familiar with the town concession stands, right? You don't want to bring the Boy Scouts in to run God bless the Boy Scouts, but you don't want them in charge of handling a concession stand for a group of 300, 200 people, et cetera.
And that could be an add-on option, concessions or no concessions.
Yeah.
I think another variable cost I might sort of, just so I can test what you're saying here and see if I understand what you're saying, like the pre-event. So like this time that the staff does to review the application and to open up the facility or put up signage or whatever it is. Do you consider that, is that variable or is
No,
that,
I mean,
I'm asking
pre-event-
Oliver to kind of clarify what he's saying.
Well, I guess a variable cost would be any cost that's incurred for that particular event.
Okay.
Right.
so pre-events I did a concert last night at the amphitheater. Pre-events refers to the security briefing you have to talk about what happens if weather happens. So it's basically a huddle with the staff and the band and peak performances representatives. And then during the events, same thing, it's the staff and, so there would be no pre-event huddle for a church service or
Well,
a
no, there could be,
nonprofit.
there could be. I'm
It
sorry.
could be if it's big enough.
Well, yeah,
It's big enough.
it depends on what they're using.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. There could be a pre-event huddle. I don't know.
Yeah, that time's there to allocate, coordination, meeting with legal, maybe there's contract issues, set up, tear down, in between. I mean, there's a variation of things in this, and I want to be crystal clear. This is not just for one group. This is for all groups.
That's right.
So we need to keep that in mind.
That's a good point. I mean, we've been looking at this through the lens of the Dillon Community Church using it. But this is for
Right.
a graduation ceremony from, Summit Middle School or Summit High School, or, a celebration to honor, right? New ownership of ABA, whatever it is, right? And so it's not all the same name. So there is certainly a variable cost for the town staff to understand, okay, what does this group want? What does it need, et cetera, et cetera.
So
And
you're
that's the
you're
challenge.
saying maybe the facility maintenance by Public Works, if I understand you correctly, would not fall into that because that's more of a general maintenance.
It sounds like to me, if we're spending $100,000 a year on general maintenance, that we have that, if there's no events, if there's 20 events, if there's 200 events. Right? But cleanup after an event, I would think should be, that's a variable cost, should be the responsibility of whoever is, booking the facility and, providing certificate of insurance, all those things that,
Right.
Need to get done. Somebody's got to check that.
So if we're following what staff put together here by your calculations, I'm looking at the cleaning number, the events department time, the sound engineer, and then legal. Do those all fall into what you're saying?
I would, yes, with the exception of legal. I think we draft a use contract, and as Nathan indicated, you kind of plug the user in, what status it is, it's this, that, the other thing, and
Whether you agree with it or not, they still review it and charge it to us.
well, that's true.
Well, and I guess that's another policy question is if you were to do that, I think you need to look at the add-ons and maybe focus like, what are you willing to rent out?
Right.
And this whole exercise is to be all encompassing. I want you all to remember this, and it's for all groups. And that's why these numbers are in front of you the way that they are.
But different groups would have different costs too. I mean, like the nonprofits, some of these are not gonna apply. Or like you said, the add-ons, like they don't do concession. I mean.
So let's go to Rachel next. I just heard you saying something, so maybe you would like to share.
First of all, what is scrim?
That's a black screening that's on the fence so that people can't stand
Oh,
on the
gotcha.
outside and look in.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we wouldn't maybe need.
Right,
Anyway, I'm
yeah.
just doing a little math, like just if you just put in cleaning and staffing without facility maintenance, it's $3,224 per event. And I mean, it's just interesting to see that we charge $1,800 for the pavilion. On a Friday Friday, Saturday or Sunday during high season. And that doesn't require any staffing, I don't think, right?
Right.
Is that correct?
Well, there's cleanup.
Cleanup, okay.
Is that
So-
charged to the facility though?
That's in the rate.
So how do you guys all feel
Well,
about?
we'll let Rachel finish her comments.
I I think it's important that we cover our costs, at minimum. And I think getting down to, just covering those things, cleaning and staffing, I would be in favor of, at least covering those costs. And that this would apply to all groups, every single group.
So you're saying that's something in the $3,200 range? Is that what your
That would be
numbers
like
say?
bare bones. I mean,
Yeah.
if we're charging $1,800 for the pavilion and, and if let's say we did settle on something like $3,000, I think that's a huge discrepancy kind of, because the pavilion is just, I mean, the amphitheater
Like
is
a
so much,
shelter.
yeah, it's so much bigger and so I think we need to be in line with that when we, when we're looking at these, what we're going to charge for other
So-
groups.
So are you saying that 3,200 would be your starting point? So like when you get
That would be like bare
50% off,
bones.
you get it down to,
Okay, so
you get it, like when we give the Dillon resident or business
50% above that.
or 50% off gets you to that number where we break even.
I would say those numbers in what it seems to me cover our basic costs. I mean, they probably don't even,
Right?
maybe it's probably more like, sort of even $5,000, but just based on the numbers that we are looking at right now, I just included cleaning for the event, after the event cleaning and the staffing without facility maintenance.
Okay,
Can I ask-
so just to clarify, so you're saying that is the absolute dead bottom rate that you would be comfortable.
I
So
would
that would
say
be the half
yes.
rate. Yeah,
Well, that would be the full price.
that would be the full price. And then,
Because we're talking about covering
so then it would be 1,600
for nonprofit.
for a
Well,
half off.
I mean, are we having that discussion in
That's
this
what I'm-
discussion or?
Just because that's what you
Okay.
were talking about. I'm trying to get
I mean, I
information
thought
out of
we
you
were
to
just talking
continue
about
the
right now,
conversation.
like what is the cost of, what is the cost of opening up the amphitheater to the town of having an event or having a group go into the amphitheater? I thought that's what we were talking about. I didn't know we were also including what's the discount.
Well,
At
it's
this
sort of
point- at
a,
this juncture.
I'm trying to suss out where we're comfortable as we set the fee schedule for opening it up to nonprofits. And so I guess the question that we're getting to is our comfort level covering our costs? Or is our comfort level
Making,
subsidizing some portion of our costs?
Yeah, I think that's what we really need to discuss. Are we comfortable subsidizing nonprofits and churches that provide tangible benefits and services to the town of Dillon?
I think that would, I think that would, given the road that we've already gone down, I think we need to really involve our legal advice on that one.
He seemed to give us the green light in a previous discussion on that.
Did you have anything else to add,
No, that's it.
Rachel? John or Kyle, who would like?
I'll say one more thing, okay, so. Clearly, the staff doesn't want to open this up. The staffing stuff here, if you extrapolate the staffing stuff here for a yoga event where you have 15 ladies in there. If you look at these fees, that's costing $4,000 to have that for 15 ladies. So how much are we, each one of those? Are we charging each one of those ladies $500 to do yoga? If we're trying to break even? The staff clearly doesn't want to do it. I don't trust any of these numbers.
So just to maybe add perspective, I think the difference in use we're talking about is an event that the town is legally allowed to sponsor, like yoga, where everyone that shows up pays the $20. And the town can legally say, we're supporting this event because it's not, whatever, it's not an exclusive rental to one specific organization that we're not supposed to be.
But how do we decide which ones we're supporting and subsidizing?
Yeah.
Because there's, line dancing, there's yoga.
Our recreation department does that. So that all
They
these,
seem to not want the church in there then because they're not willing to subsidize that.
it's not about willingness to subsidize because the town cannot put on the church service. The town can't partner to put the church service on,
But they're not.
That's
putting
where the-
Yoga class or the line
But-
dancing either.
but they are sponsoring it. And we can say, put on today by the town of Dillon. And so it is a part of the town of Dillon. It's a thing to do in Dillon, sponsored by the town. And so, yes, it's subsidized and it's not illegal because it doesn't fall into that category where we ran into a problem of the town being a partner on it.
Well, in the past, we've let Summit Musicians Relief Fund, a nonprofit that raises money for musicians who get cancer or whatever. Arnie, that was set up when Arnie Green was sick, right? They've been letting them do free concerts. So
Right.
we've been subsidizing that. I mean, how do we so we have been subsidized and the church has been getting a good rate too. So there's a precedent for several groups, nonprofits and churches we've subsidized. Why are we looking at, all these numbers, which I agree with John. it seems like, somebody's trying to make the number so it's non-workable.
So I think we should be careful about the accusations we sort of put out there. We asked staff to put together a list of the expenses we incur at the amphitheater. And that's what they did for us. That's exactly what they did for us. And so we can take this information and read it however we want, which is thus far what we've been doing in this conversation. You can take whatever numbers you want, but it is the Constitution of the United States of America that prohibits us from sponsoring the church event. And that's why we have to come up with the separate category. And I think even, and I don't know this for sure, but I think last time we brought up the Summit Musicians Relief Fund, which we're not doing anymore, but that was a town-sponsored event. And it was a benefactor of a town. The town is able to sponsor that event
It's a
because they're
nonprofit.
not a religious group. Right, and there are lots of nonprofits that we partner with during the free shows who benefit, right? And the town is giving a benefit to those nonprofits. And so we do have a mechanism for the town to give back to nonprofits, and we've been doing that. And so the conversation tonight is finding a way to open it up to events that the town cannot sponsor, like a church service, and talking about the fees that the town is willing to forgive or not. And, whether you agree with it or not, this is a breakdown of what we pay and what it costs, and look at it however way you want. I don't think we should be putting any intention on the staff's part other than to give us costs that we could be looking at. And to me, this is actually comforting, and it justifies our $25,000 rental fee, which wasn't that 2 years ago. It was something like 14,000. So we bumped it up a lot to this huge number. And at least this way, I mean, this is something we can look at and say, $25,000, it should be $30,000, right?
I think
So
we should bump it up because.
Just to clarify, the fee schedule for the paid shows, there's a range between $25,000 and $30,000.
Is that across the mountain town? I mean, all over?
We are on the high end.
Okay, yep.
I tend to agree with Oliver. Let's take another cut at this and take out the fixed costs and just look at the variable costs, which is the actual cost of doing
Well,
an additional show.
if I could make a suggestion, so we've got the pavilion, there's a price sheet for the pavilion, which is a beautiful facility. A half-day rental Friday to Sunday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, a half-day rental in the, peak season is $1,000. That, to me, is, I think, a reasonable starting point to have a discussion. It's a great facility, I'm sure people stand in line to book the pavilion for various events in the peak months. I would think a reasonable starting point is to say, it's a nonprofit local entity, should pay at least $1,000 plus whatever variable costs are incurred, which is
Sound engineer.
cleaning, sound engineer, maybe an allocation for legal.
Well, the bathrooms at the amphitheater, I found out, are actually locked during the church service for the past 3 years. So the same bathrooms that they're using when they use the pavilion, and they're not charging a cleaning fee, are the same bathrooms the church uses, the bathrooms in the town park. So I'm not sure a cleaning fee is even appropriate because the church brings mops and buckets and brooms and cleans the whole amphitheater service.
Well, we don't have a breakdown of where that $1,000 come from, but it probably is cleaning.
For
Because
the
there is,
park bathrooms?
right,
From the
it's
pavilion, I think.
to rent the pavilion, because there are really no other, you don't need staffing.
Yeah.
Pavilion.
Right.
So,
And if we have others, the church is clean, but somebody else might not be.
Well, that's the
No,
challenge.
listen, I think it's very reasonable in things like sound systems and even cleaning, certainly concessions, to have professional staff manage those for the event, and it costs whatever it costs. You don't want to break equipment.
so Oliver, I listened to you say $1,000 is your starting point plus cleaning and the audio engineer. So are you saying the absolute dead bottom rate, the half off rate should be $2,000? And then double that for a typical rate, a typical rental at
Okay.
$4,000?
I think it's reasonable based on the prices we have for the pavilion, which is $1,000 for a half day rental. Peak season, that's a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, plus whatever variable costs would be incurred if the folks that are booking the amphitheater want to have, use the sound system, they got to pay for the professional people there. They
Well,
definitely
Carolyn,
have to pay for, they definitely have to pay for, I would think, for the, audio engineer, and whatever cleanup, would be required.
and if you,
And then I'm sorry,
Yeah,
then I
go
would say, also based on how we handle the pavilion, there's a discount.
Yeah,
for
50% discount, just gonna-
businesses, et cetera. I would say a discount on the rental fee, but not on the variable costs. Variable costs are incurred. And I don't think the town should, pay for the cleanup of anybody,
Okay.
who's using any of the facilities. But a rental fee is a rental fee that typically, folks who book venues are very accustomed to paying.
so that $1,000 fee becomes 500 if it's a Dillon resident or business, because there's a 50% discount. If you look down below the fee schedule.
Yeah, and that policy, I assume, it has been in place for a number of years,
Yes.
since the new
Yes.
pavilion was built, right?
Okay, so if I understand, just so I am understanding and we can all understand, you're saying we figure out what is this number? And in that $1,000 would be the minimum you start off, and that would get you a half day rental.
Well,
on
50%
during
dis,
peak season. I'm just asking Oliver to
50%
clarify his comments.
Yes,
Okay, so if it were the same, you would start at $1,000 and then you're saying you would add on cleaning,
I would,
audio engineer.
I would start at $1,000. I think that's a reasonable starting point, and add on the variable costs incurred by whatever group, whatever group that wants to use that facility. If
Yeah.
it's a nonprofit based in Dillon, then I think they should get, as we do with the pavilion, a 50% discount on the rental fee, not on
Yep.
the very, those are incurred regardless.
Okay, variable fee plus rental costs. Okay. Kyle, we haven't heard from you in this discussion. Did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, sure. I think, saying that, we don't trust town staff numbers, or the church cleans the amphitheater better than town staff, I think it's extremely inappropriate. And, we're here to support the town. So you need to think about whether or not you want to do that, John. I trust town numbers. I trust the staff. They put a lot of work into this. If we need to come down with, I honestly don't see why any nonprofit could need a $750,000 sound system. I don't understand that. And I don't think it should be included. If they need a sound system, they can bring their own. Again, it's an amphitheater. It's supposed to project upward.
So you're saying almost rent it just like the pavilion, like you're just getting a covered structure, basically.
Yes.
Okay.
Karen, can I just respond?
Before we respond, let's let Kyle finish his train of thought. And then I will go to you next, John.
I'm fine. It's the numbers that are presented here are fine with me. For keeping in mind, it's for all nonprofits, which is very limited in this discussion.
Okay. So you're saying the 28,000?
I believe covering everything. No, it doesn't need to be 28,000. I don't recall how I came up with it. I was down to 8,000 per use.
Maybe that was like cleaning, staffing, legal plus debt service. I think gets you pretty close to that.
Minimum, but not careless.
Minimum, but not care, like a minimum, number that's low enough that some people could achieve it, but not so low that we would, is that what you're meaning by?
Yes.
And so the 8,000 would be your drop dead number or your number that you would then divide in half for a 50% local rate.
If we're willing to make that kind of donation that many times a summer, that's a discussion to have.
Okay. Anything else? John?
All right, so I mean, if I'm gonna question, I'm allowed to question the staff numbers. I mean, is any of the staff doing overtime? No. So basically, the staff time that they're allotting $1,000 to is something that we're paying out already. Not doing overtime. Sound engineer over there, if it's Adam or somebody else, isn't getting paid $400 for 4 hours. I used to work over there. He's probably making $25 an hour, $30 an hour. Bike and all that other stuff. So they exaggerate that number by $200. So these numbers do not stand up. I do not trust the staff when I see these numbers. So, you know, I have an accounting background. That's stupid. There's obviously some intent in here to make it more expensive than it really is. So I stand by that.
You have a background in everything.
I know.
Our local citizen, engineer, lawyer, accountant.
That's lawyer.
All right. So, okay, let's dig into another point, I think, Kyle, that you made, but that is probably something, maybe gives us another item to look at. So let's look at Rachel's number. So like if we were just talking about the fixed costs, right? The cleaning, staff time, legal, $3,200.
Variable.
Sorry, are those variable? Yeah,
Those are variable.
variable. Got it. $3,200. We'll just go with the number Rachel, and it's not exact, it's 3,700.
Well, if we want to include the pre-event, the during event, the audio engineer, the only thing I didn't include was the facility maintenance. So,
Okay,
and that comes to
So sorry.
3724.
so
That's cleaning, staffing without facility maintenance, public works, and legal.
okay, and a question I was trying to get at with all of you guys is that the starting point or is that the half up? Is that the lowest we're willing to go, or are we willing to subsidize it?
Can I
And so
comment on that?
if we talk about that 50% off rate for in-town rate,
I think that's where the subsidy comes from.
that's the subsidy. So it's half of 37 is
So just those staffing numbers.
1600, right? Something like that's 1800.
18, yeah, 18.
Guys,
So
those,
if 1800, sorry, I'm just trying to work through the information I'm taking.
yeah, but
So if we look at Rachel's number and we divide it by half, 1,800, so the subsidy for each event would be $1,800. It'd be like somebody applying to our nonprofit grant cycle. And every time they wanted to use the amphitheater, we would quantify it at $1,800. If we went with the 3,700, which is what Rachel's approximating as our variable costs, and if we gave that half of that away, it'd be $1,800 for every use.
can I comment on those variable
Don't-
costs?
Sure.
So the staffing for pre-event and during event is for like a concert. And we played there last night. There's like 8 guys there from the town, 8 staff members running the event, backstage, setting up stuff. I've also played 2 church services there as a guest musician, and there's no staff for those. They do all of that themselves. So, you know, that $2,000 for pre-event and during event staff, there's no staff there. There's a audio engineer from the town of Dillon, and that's it. The church does all the legwork of setting stuff up and putting stuff away. And, you know, they've been doing it successfully for 6 years.
I think it depends on how comfortable we are with not having any staffing.
Well, the problem is if you have a group that doesn't have the experience and training, then you need all that. But for the church, they're doing all that stuff themselves. And that's how it gets complicated.
I think we have
And-
to make it the same for everybody.
Right.
And it
And
may
then the
not be
other thing I know that
affordable.
Jesse told us goes into that number is reviewing the application. It would be staff time to review the application. And I think that is, I think pre-event for a paid concert or a whatever concert is probably different than what we're talking about, but it would be the application review, staff time to set it up and coordinate it, all of that kind of stuff. And it's not necessarily, and then Rachel, I think you're right on the during event is, are we comfortable renting the facility out without having staff? And maybe that's one of those fixed prices where if you're just using it as a structure, like a covered structure, and you're not using the sound system and you're not using any of the buildings, then maybe it doesn't need to be staffed.
Well, here's a brand new thought on all that. Maybe it doesn't make sense to have a one size fits all on the staffing because, for example, if you have a graduation, you're gonna need a sound guy and maybe 2 staff. You're not gonna need a lot of staff, right?
The,
If you put on a full-on concert like a Smurf Summit Musicians Relief Fund concert, you basically need the full staff that you have at a paid show.
the town of Silverthorne Pavilion, they have a really good, I mean, they have that. It's like a menu of services.
Right.
you
So
you
I'm
rent
not
the-
sure a one size fits all approach is the
Yeah.
way to go. You
Yeah.
may have to have the staff put together an estimate of what kind of staffing would be required
Mhm.
and then pay for what you use, don't pay for what you don't
Yep.
use.
So, got it?
Right.
And you
I
still
still
need a
don't know
staff
how-
person to do that.
Right,
Right? I mean, you still need a staff person to meet with the group or feel, you know, even if it's a phone call or exchanging emails and say, okay, here's the contract, here's the menu of services.
Yeah.
What do you need? I mean, that takes time to do that too.
Sure.
So.
Could the town buy a much cheaper sound system just to use for these types of events that could be, the cost could be spread out over the next?
Don't we have one? Isn't there a small sound system? That's like our old one that was.
Yeah, we have one and that's in this add-on fee menu,
Boy, that's a lot of work setting that up and tearing it down.
but that's where the staff
The
time
staff is
comes
here.
in.
Well, for the church services, they don't roll out the subwoofers. They just use the hanging arrays that are already there. All they do is bring out the mixing board.
Renee, you started saying something. Did you want to?
I can't remember now when I was. No, I'm good.
I would perhaps recommend that we consider this starting point of $1,000 for an event. Plus variable costs, which are going to be a little bit different for every event that takes place.
That's exactly what.
And I would have faith in our town staff to work with whomever, the event booker is, if you will, to determine what the appropriate town staff is. So, fee to rent it. On top of that, variable costs that are incurred. But to get to that variable cost, every event's gonna be a little bit different. And the town has every reason to want, proper folks there making sure that the facility is used, taken care of, et cetera. And I trust the town staff to do that. And we have an amphitheater, so we have to assume
Yes.
we're gonna have people knocking on our door. Thank goodness. That's
Yeah.
So
all part of why we, enjoy living in Dillon.
So Oliver, I agree with you. I couldn't agree with you more, and I would trust staff to do this.
Yep.
However, based on just the pavilion rental numbers, I could easily see where you can put 90 people for just a shelter. I could easily see those numbers being tripled or quadrupled to get to the starting point of the amphitheater rental when you look at the pavilion structure versus the amphitheater structure. And I would trust staff to give us those numbers, but I suspect a half-day rental of the amphitheater in May could end up being $1,000 instead of a $500, or, you know, or a half-day rental during full season, Friday to Sunday, being at a starting point of $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, just based on where we have our other rental fees. And then on top of that, we add on the other costs we're talking about, the cleaning, the staff time, if you're having the sound system or not, that's another fee and another staff person, something like that. And so, I mean, so are we comfortable with staff presenting a number to us that would fall in line with our other rentals? Or is this something we want to come up with on our own? That's so,
I think we want to do it on our own, and
okay,
each event's going to be different. So staff, is going to have to say for graduation, we need this many staff members. We're going to anticipate this much cleaning. And for a Summit Musicians Relief Fund concert, we're going to probably need more cleaning because people are going to be spilling beers and stuff like that. We're going to need more staff to do all the setup and tear down.
I think both of those already fall into things we're already doing. So we don't
Yeah.
even need to be thinking about those particular events because those are events that the town can sponsor. So we don't need to worry about the pricing structure on those events.
But the
It's
one caution,
events that the town is not going to be
right,
sponsoring. So like a wedding or a church service.
Yeah.
Or basically not a private, I'm not saying private event like other people aren't allowed, but maybe other people aren't allowed. But a private event in that one that it is not legal for the town to
Right.
give to.
well, as I put together in my 2-tier pricing, we should be making money. We should be making profits off weddings, off of corporate events, off of private parties. That's not nonprofits and that's not a church event. However, for church events and nonprofits, if we have a starting point that is above what they can afford, then all of this is meaningless because we'll get nobody. They can't afford it.
I'm afraid it may be cost prohibitive. I'm afraid that's where this conversation may be taking us. Because I am not hearing a lot of, and I haven't heard a number from everyone, but I
Well-
haven't heard any numbers that are like, do it for $500.
Well, I agree with Oliver with his number of 1,000 and for the nonprofits. I'm not talking about all of them, but the other, each event is going to vary on the add-ons that you have. So again, I think we come up with, we're going to make more from the concerts. We're going to make, we have the town sponsored events, but then we have the nonprofits that, yes, I think we should start at 1,000 and discount it for the nonprofits, depending on if they're in the town.
Well,
like
50%
Alter
discount,
Bridge,
just like the
50%. To
pavilion.
work with the community that we have in town.
For a half-day rental?
Well, I don't know, it's not really a half day. They're like, any organization that use it, let's say Sunday morning, and then they use it from 9 to 11.
9 to 2 or 3 to 8. It's just where our rental schedule is now.
Well, not all of them are gonna take that time frame. So
They'd
it's
have
all
that
gonna vary.
frame.
I'm sorry?
But they could have that whole time frame.
Well, they don't need that whole, and some don't need that, not everybody, but some of the nonprofits won't need that time frame. So it's going to be dependent
Trying to be
on which nonprofit is using it on which day.
right.
And so I agree with Oliver of starting out, he makes sense to me.
Having a rental fee and then adding on variable costs.
Yeah,
And
specific to
discounting-
that event.
For the
And
town.
those variable costs would be agreed upon between, the user, the booker of that event and the town. And they're,
Right.
and you'll have your principles about if you're going to use the sound system, you either have the sound engineer, they're raising the cost.
Just like that
$50 an hour,
nonprofit's
whatever,
been doing
whatever the cost
all
is.
along, but we're opening it to everybody.
Yeah, I'm in Oliver's camp as well.
Okay, so we have sort of an idea developing here that we would come up with a rental fee that are you saying, did you say $1,000
I think I said that's a good starting.
starting point?
So I fully agree with your comparison, the pavilion compared to the amphitheater, it's not apples to apples, right?
Well, plus the
Right.
50% discount for Dillon residents.
So maybe it's a $1,500, maybe it's a $2,000 fee. That, again, there's a 50% discount for a Dillon-based nonprofit or Summit County-based nonprofit.
Right, it seems weird if we were to charge like less than we charge for the pavilion. Right, we shouldn't release.
Yeah, that,
$1,500 with a 50% discount for Dillon.
I agree with Rachel on that, absolutely. Because we have to have a policy that, remember, is defensible.
Right.
Somebody tried to challenge it.
Okay, so as staff is building this, it's gonna look a little different than what we have for the pavilion because it's not gonna be available to rent every single day. There's limited availability. Is that right? Do we have an idea of what that schedule looks like, Nathan?
There's not at the moment. I can't speak off the top of my head, but clearly, if you take last weekend as an example, right? We had a paid event on Friday and a paid event on Sunday. Both of those days would be completely blocked out because we have bands coming at 6, 7, 8 in the morning to set up.
Okay,
So those, it would just be off limits.
okay, so if there's another event, the calendar is gonna be blocked off that day. And then do you think, is staff talking about a half day, just like at the pavilion, where it would be like a 9 to 2 or 3 to 8 kind of rental?
We haven't gone that far because the challenge that we're running into is what's the policy, right? Are we gonna try to accommodate a nonprofit in the morning and then try to do like a recreation thing in the afternoon? Or are we just gonna focus on the nonprofit for the day? You see where we're going with this? Like, we can only do so much in a given day. We currently don't have the staff, so we're gonna have to hire staff. So like the build out of this is not gonna be like an overnight miracle. It's gonna be over a span of weeks if we can find the people to hire. We're not trying to manipulate the data here, but the data is the data.
Well, it depends on the nonprofit. I mean, the church staff's their own thing. All they need is a sound engineer, so they need to staff it for that.
Well, that, I guess that's a policy question for you all. Do you want the amphitheater to be a professionally run event space? Or do you want it to just be a free for all like the pavilion?
I think it depends on the user. In some cases, the user has as much training as the Dillon town staff. In other cases, they don't.
I just don't think that covers us legally, though. And I understand that that may be the case with the church, but I don't think that covers the town. And I don't think we would be doing our duty as stewards of the town by saying, well, this user group's okay, we trust them. And I don't know that our insurance would cover us for
It's
that.
not about trust, it's about the training and experience they have.
Well, that's kind of a trust thing, training and experience. And if they're not covered under our insurance, then it is a trust thing. And it's a whether or not this council is willing to take a risk with our facility and our equipment. And I get that it may be unlikely to damage a speaker, but something could happen. I mean, somebody could spill a drink on the board. And I mean, that could be the end of it, you know?
People that are trained don't take a drink anywhere near the board.
Maybe not. Maybe they don't, but maybe their kids do. I'm just saying, I'm not comfortable with trusting any group that we rent it out to staff it themselves. So
Well, if we go
I
with,
would like to put staffing, and especially if they're using the sound equipment, that they have to have an audio engineer.
oh, of
that's a
course,
town
yeah,
piece.
I agree with that.
And I would argue that $400, John, you may be right, $25 to $30 an hour.
Well, they mark it up.
That might be plus, and I bet it's a little bit more because
Peak
it's more of a
performances,
specialty.
hires them and marks it
We
up.
also have costs to our staff that aren't just their payroll, you know? We have insurance, we have workers' comp, we have all sorts of things that we buy into for all these staffers. So what we pay them doesn't equate to what they cost. Okay,
If we follow Oliver's plan, then it takes all of that into consideration because you assess each event on an individual basis. on what do they really need. And if we follow that path, then, I think we're covered both legally and the equipment's going to be protected as well.
So where do we land on that fee, Oliver? You and Rachel were working something out about it being bigger than the
Well,
pavilion.
I mean, I'm just thinking common sense. The pavilion is a very nice building. It's near as, big and as nice as the amphitheater. We charge $1,000 for a half-day rental, Friday through Sunday, May 24th through September 2nd, for the use of the amphitheater, or I'm sorry, use of the pavilion. Maybe we bump that price up, right? The retail price, if you will, knowing that, let's say I'm making this up and be happy to consider others. It's a $2,000 fee, but there's a 50% discount for, a nonprofit based in Dillon and or Summit County.
So you're saying 2,000 for a half day, Friday to Sunday peak season.
With a 50% discount for Dillon base.
Right. So that's already on the bottom. I'm just talking about setting the rental fee because we're
Yes.
not talking about the 50% off rate. We're talking about who everybody else who's going to make up the cost for who gets it for half off is
Yep.
going to. And so are you saying double the rest of them too?
Well, I think we need to do one of two things. There's either a flat rental fee for anybody outside of the concerts and the town shows that take place, right? Or we have a third bucket that we had talked about with the lawyer that came up, which is for shows or events, right, that are both nonprofit events that might have a lower rental fee and a for-profit event, a wedding.
I think we were only talking
So-
about nonprofits.
Well, then that's fine. But you can have a wedding and charge more.
A lot
theoretically,
more.
Right? You could say a wedding destination, these are destination weddings, right? And, people would come in, theoretically caterers that are based here, flower shops that are based here, et cetera, all make a nice little business when word gets out that this is a great, wedding venue to have. But we should charge significantly more, I
that
would
should be
think,
for
because
profit.
that's not a nonprofit. That's not necessarily
More of a
Sort of,
That's
private party.
a corporate event.
Yeah.
sort of a fourth bucket there.
Yeah.
Okay, Kyle, go ahead.
I think we need to keep in mind that if something is going on at the amphitheater, as a nonprofit, it could make the pavilion look very unattractive to be renting it out during the same time.
Say that one more time
Yeah,
to
I
have,
didn't get that.
If there's a fund of some kind by a nonprofit at the pavilion, to have something, at the amphitheater, to have a wedding going on at the same time at the pavilion, probably wouldn't be very appealing.
I think there's some kind of deconfliction thing they do already for paid shows and weddings at the pavilion. I'm not sure how that works, but I know they,
So it might make one unrentable.
Yep.
When the other one is,
Yep.
if one is overpowering the other, then that could be a problem.
correct.
When the amphitheater's booked for a paid show, we don't allow the pavilion to be booked.
Right. So if we're allowing the amphitheater to be booked anytime, then does that take out the pavilion being rentable?
Good. It's a valid comment, depending on what the use is.
And I don't really think we're talking about that many events because the amount of available days that it's not booked for a free show or a paid show is kind of, you can count it on two hands. So we're looking at probably less than 10 possible events a year just based on availability of the amphitheater.
For weekends?
No, weekdays and weekends both. I mean, there's just not that many available dates left. So worst case is probably going to be like 10 events. It's the most you can even do.
so I think, let me just summarize where I think I'm hearing this conversation take us right now. And to be clear, the direction we gave staff and the resolution we're working towards that is only for nonprofits. It doesn't include for-profit. So if we want to go into that realm, we need to write something different that includes for-profit rentals. Because right now it's limited to 501c3s very specifically. With that in mind, the numbers that we've sort of worked on, which would be the rental fee, basically double everything that's written in the pavilion rental. So that'd be $12.50 for a half day Monday to Thursday rental, $2,000 for a half day Friday to Sunday rental, $22.50 for a Monday to Thursday full day rental, $3,600 for a full day rental on a Friday through Sunday. Plus, so that's the rental fee, which would be subject to 50% off or 25% off, whatever are, and do you guys like that? That
Should be the
50%
same
off
as the pavilion, I think.
is exactly the same as the pavilion, so that 50% off for a Dillon resident or business, or we're just saying 50% off?
Still a nonprofit.
It's only nonprofit,
Yeah,
so
Dylan-
there's no point in setting it at 2,000 because if all nonprofits, and this is only for nonprofits, automatically get 50% off.
Well, we're doing it for
Right.
Dillon-based businesses and residents, so maybe,
Well, we're not. We only have talked about, like you said, we only talked about the resolution we have crafted only addresses 501c3s. So that's not Dillon residents or businesses. It's only nonprofits. So we don't need to even be thinking about it as half off
well,
because
no,
it's only for nonprofits anyway. So we're setting the fee at a half price fee.
no, Josh, in our discussion with him, said, anything based in Dillon or focused or providing benefits to Dillon would could qualify for a preferred rate.
I think we were talking specifically about 501c3s.
Right. He said if they're based in Dillon or their services are focused on Dillon, then
Oh, so you're saying a Dillon-based 501c3. That's where the-
Dillon-based or outside of Dillon, providing
it's-
services to Dillon would both qualify for the discounted rate.
So so this is the nonprofit rental rate in general.
Mhm.
If you're in Dillon, it's half off. On top of those, so half off that rental fee. On top of that, there would be a à la carte menu, which everyone would be subject to cleaning, staff time, whatever legal is required for their contract. And then there's the question of the security or the sound system. So where have we landed
Well,
on
they would have to hire a
conversation?
ta-
So, right, it would be
audio
a town staff audio engineer.
Yep.
If we want to be renting out the sound system. So that was the question that I'm not sure I've heard an answer to. So I've heard.
I sense if there's
Knows.
a professional sound engineer at the mixing table, I would feel comfortable with a group renting out the sound system, as long as they also have a certificate of insurance. But the critical piece to me would be to have a professional sound engineer, working the system.
I would agree with
So sound system is on the table as long as our staff
There's a cost.
is
to-
running it. And there's a
There's a cost
cost to the sound
Well,
system,
it would be the staff.
just the staff. time.
Yeah.
And we're not going to charge any sort of like cost to cover any losses or
We
anything. Well, that's what
Yeah.
let's work that out. Is that something? we
cost to
wanna do?
cover what?
I don't know, an insurance policy on the sound system, whether it's a deposit or whatever.
Well, yeah, I asked some of the sound engineers, why isn't the sound system insured? They said, it's basically idiot proof. You can't break it even if you tried because of those digital limiters. So, and when John talked to his people in Live Nation, they've never broken a sound system because it's designed so it can't be broken.
I would argue there shouldn't be an additional fee other than the staff person.
Yeah.
It's a sunk cost.
So like the town of Silverthorne, they have a good, this is for their pavilion and they have a menu of services. So they have they charge for a microphone, for a portable sound system, screen, technical assistance with light sound per hour. additional hour, so there's like we can just come up with something like this, and the staff person who's meeting with the group kind of
Right,
determines
and
their needs.
in some cases,
Contract.
in some cases, the nonprofit has their own microphones and whatever, like the church brings over their own mics and
Then they
uses their
wouldn't
own
need-
stuff.
Yeah.
But like Smurf would not have all that equipment. They would need to rent it. So, that's again, you
But
need to,
again, Smurf is one that the town can sponsor with. So the town can contribute that money without it being a violation of the First Amendment. Right? The town can do it for free and say, this is a free concert and we're putting it on for the benefit of the public and this group is benefiting. Although I think Jesse said we're not doing it anymore. Because there was some problem with fundraising at those, and there's a way that they can benefit, but they can't be benefiting the way. Yes.
Mm.
So
Well-
like it really can't, we can't be bringing into the conversation things that the town can work with. It has to be things we're limited that
Yep.
we can't really partner with. Which is basically churches. And the only way to accomplish churches is to say 501c3. I think that's where we've taken this conversation.
Probably nonprofits is more accurate.
Nonprofits.
terms, I think.
Well, I guess that's a question too.
Well,
Are all churches
No.
registered 501c3s?
There's
No.
501c4s and C5s and C6. I mean, there's a whole bunch of, that's the tax code officer. There's a whole bunch of not for
right. I think right now it's written as 501c3 in the resolution we were looking at.
I think that's something.
which may or may not apply to the church.
We would need legal advice on that.
So it sounds like we have a place we're ready to start here. Which is basically the rental fee doubling the pavilion rates, plus adding on cleaning, legal, staff time, which includes the
Variable
sound
costs.
system. And then what we were just saying about, I don't know, losing it all here. Maybe you could send over that. Do you have what Silverthorne does
Yeah.
for their pavilion? And that would give us sort of a starting point
Mhm.
of how to check off each thing or what we want to be on the list. And we can look at that and then also look at, maybe we can have a conversation in our next work session about what do we mean by nonprofit? Does that sound reasonable to everyone?
We probably need a lawyer to clarify what,
Okay, great. I think those are good places to work toward. Anything else we want to add to this discussion before we move on? Staff reports and legislative updates. We have the Marina Director's Report, Craig Simpson.
Well, speaking of 501c3s, on Saturday, we sponsored the first annual summer solstice. With that, the solstice was on Thursday or Friday, however you look at it. We were able to, through that event, raise $8,000 for the Dillon Junior Yacht Club. So, thank you. Thank you. That well exceeded our goal. Mother Nature kind of threw her hat in the ring there for a little bit. I think we would have gotten more, but for the first time pulling off that event, it went really well. And then an update on our rental fleet. So we have the full attention of Yamaha right now, working through an issue that they believe is in cooperation with us, may have to do with the barometric pressure at this elevation. They've been fantastic. We're getting through it. And yeah, it's great. It's good to work with a good company.
like they're supposed to.
Well, they're outrunning their fuel supply at full throttle, which means they're outrunning the amount of atmosphere that we have up here to feed that fuel supply.
Nitrous oxide tank.
We could do that. We'll see. That's really the only updates I have. Any questions?
Questions or comments for Craig? Up next, Jessie
Thank you.
Clayhoff provided, thank you, Craig, provided her report. Did anyone have any questions that Nathan could pass on to her? Next, we have the town engineers report. Dan, if you would.
So we submitted a 50% submittal to CDOT for the sidewalk project along Highway 6 from Evergreen down through the Dillon Medical Center property, and they've accepted that. And so I'm working on final construction drawings and final costs and everything for that. We'll bring that back to you hopefully in 2 weeks. And then we have pretty much all our agreements figured out with the Dillon Medical Facility. So we'll be bringing back all those agreements to you on the next council meeting.
Great. Thank you. Questions or comments for Dan? Great. Up next, we had senior planners report, Ned West.
Hi there. I had a couple of attachments to my report. I'll just highlight those. I think one was a bill passed by the state, signed by the governor, which outlaws non-useful turf. So we're going to work on aligning our municipal code to align with that. We have some time to accomplish that, but it will be something we'll be looking at. And I've already spoken with the Planning Commission about it. Also attached was kind of the draft plan for the native species garden. We are moving forward with that. We've been finding sources for the plant materials. We are hoping to, towards the end of the summer, do phase 1, which would be the earthwork and setting some of the rock. And if we can find somebody to help us design the irrigation system, install the first part of that system. And then finally, just highlighting the master plan drawings that we have received from the Porritt Group. We did discuss those with the Planning Commission at our last meeting. And so they have had an opportunity to get out into the public eye. They do include the project that was previously approved, but that's not included in this packet for obvious reasons. Yes, so if you have any questions about that master plan, it identifies several sites and identifies a couple of workforce housing projects. One of the projects there on the corner of Lake Dillon Drive and Labonte, I know you all did have an opportunity to get a quick view of. And that mixed use development is kind of exciting. It might bring a small grocery store to our downtown area. So pretty exciting. Any questions about my report or any of the attachments to it?
Questions? Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Council member comments and committee reports. Anybody have anything?
Summer Stage Board's tomorrow, so.
Nice. You retained all of your committees from our work session
You
discussion.
can get fired from anything. Thank you.
Council meeting agenda review. I don't think we are changing anything about tonight's meeting. Okay. Take 10 minutes, be back here at 7 for the regular meeting.
Actually, Dennis, you said you wanted this.
I ride my bike every day.
Lots of. I know.
I haven't done like small courage read or something. It's